if it was going to be something that was like one of those innocuous secrets that was never going to get anybody in trouble or get somebody hurt.
Yeah.
Some of those secrets stay with me to this day.
Man found dead in a random attack.
About a spike in domestic violence.
Hello, Dave.
Hello, Nicole.
I'm so happy to be chatting with you again on our fun podcast of The Ride Along.
So happy to be chatting with you as well.
Yes, and thank you everybody for joining us. This is our feel-good true crime podcast. We've already touched on a lot from your past as a homicide detective, and we're gonna dive in a little deeper today.
Yeah.
Something that I think a lot of us,
undercover.
a little undercover. We're going undercover because you spent a big portion of your career undercover. Yeah. And I've got a lot of questions, as you know. I know we can't get into too many details because we can't damage any, current investigations that are out there. But we're kind of giving broad strokes as to that whole process and what you learned from all of that. Yeah. So first, tell me a little bit about that portion of your career and what it all entailed.
Yeah. So, for me, I was part of one of the biggest social experiments you could be part of.
Right.
I had the opportunity to get to go into a community of people that I had not a lot of familiarity with. Right.
Right.
I got to break bread with bad guys, some that were really good guys, but just chose to do bad things, and learned a ton from it, and so that part of my career lasted about 3 years, but it was so important. It was such an important 3 years because one of the things that taught me a lot about is humility. When it comes to looking at people maybe that we consider to be downtrodden or disadvantaged or vulnerable, there is a story behind almost all of them.
Right.
And that story can be tragic as their lives are right then and there as you're witnessing it. And so it also taught me so much about how to communicate, think on my feet, and understand bad guys better, so that you could catch them easier. And it was, again, I say it was as part of this amazing social experience that spanned 3 years, and very, very valuable experience for me.
Yeah, and this idea of white picket fences is, there's this imagery of a white picket fence of what I think people strive to achieve that, right? Yeah. It's like a perfection, I guess, of sorts, also social status, and it kind of means that you've made it, right?
Yeah.
But not everybody lives in, surrounded by white picket fences, and you've definitely been witness. Yeah, exactly. You've been witness to that, and you really had to infiltrate yourself with these people who, you definitely felt a shift in society once you also became a member of this group too.
So true. It's that social experiment piece.
Yeah.
You imagine one day, think about the shock in everybody's lives, including my wife at the time's life.
Yeah.
Right? One day, she marries a shiny button in shape police officer.
Yeah.
Who then all of a sudden one day decides that, hey, this is a direction in my career that I want to kind of go down or pursue. And now you're coming home and you smell like cigarettes and stale beer every single night, and your clothes are, dirtier than when you left the house.
And not only the way you look and smell, but your safety. I'm sure that scared her for knowing where you were, spending a lot of your time and with who.
It's funny. I always said, actually, in that whole experience, I think I was more safe there than I ever was when I was just a uniformed police officer out patrolling. And the reason...
You were one of them, right?
Well, Yeah, and there was always people around. There was always people watching out for you.
Gotcha.
There was always extra eyes on you. You didn't operate in anonymity. You worked with a collective group of people.
Right.
And that team, we all worked really, really hard to ensure that all of us were safe every single night.
So let's go back a little bit and talk about even just how you looked and how you had to transform yourself. And it wasn't just physically, it was a lot about the way you talked, your name. You had to give yourself a whole new life. So can you describe a little bit what you looked like at that time?
Yeah. Well, have you ever been in a situation like this where you had to change your appearance to sort of fit a situation?
Well, I actually have a recent story. It's not about my appearance per se, but just a couple of weeks ago, I had a bad spell of vertigo, right? And I just so happened, unfortunately, to be traveling that day. But I had such bad vertigo that I told my parents, who I was traveling with, I need a wheelchair. And that's going to be the most effective way to get me through this airport. And as soon as I sat in that wheelchair, it felt excessive, but at the same time, I thought I didn't have my balance. And I'm like, this is just going to be so much easier for everybody. But even just what I witnessed being in a wheelchair and a lot of really sad looks because I had my two young kids with me, but yet people moved out of the way. We were able to get, through security with priority and all of these things. But obviously not that I would take advantage, and I, definitely do not have, any severe disability like I know many other people do. So I'm not, kind of comparing myself to them, but even just being in a wheelchair made me feel different. And I felt that societal shift a little bit. So
it opens up vulnerability.
It doesn't take much really, but it also kind of gives you a little bit of that perspective, right?
Totally.
What a lot of people go through.
Like when you talk about people parting ways, that was something that happened. Once I lost that polish, of a uniform.
People were scared of you.
Yeah, they did. They started to part their ways a little bit. I learned how to slouch instead of stand tall. I had to learn a completely different language.
Right.
I had to learn the language of drugs and street vernacular I'd never heard of before. Right? Jargon. It was going to be no longer, Nicole and I. It was me and Nicole.
Right.
These little shifts that you have to make.
Yeah.
And and sort of through that process, I always said, it was like watching a puppy dog grow. You actually don't see your dog growing until one day you just wake up and find yourself a dog.
Right. It's very gradual.
It's very gradual.
Did you liken it to method acting? Could you just switch that persona on and off when you came home?
Well, I guess it's debatable.
Okay.
Right. I if you ask me, I would say I did an okay job of it.
Right.
If you ask somebody else, they'd say maybe not.
And were you ever fearful of getting caught, and giving yourself away?
We got caught often, that wasn't something that didn't happen.
Right.
People could figure things out sort of along the way.
Right.
And when that did happen, we just had to make a decision on how we were going to deal with it as a team. We had protocols and measures and things of that nature that kind of make sure that if something like that did happen, that we could disengage from the scenario safely and that. So it did happen that way.
And I'm sure you met so many memorable people during your time as an undercover cop. So any of them kind of come to mind?
Oh, there are so many. But, one of the things I'll just say, when we sit here today and we look out and we see somebody, say, from a vulnerable population walking down the street. And we think, as they come up to our car at an intersection looking for money, we think, well, why can't that person go get a job?
Right. Yeah.
Right? Well, it's hard to do if you're wearing your underwear on the outside of your pants. Let's be honest. Right? I lived in a world where I got to put on a mask every day, but I still got to take it off. But it's not easy when the mask is on.
Right.
And you think about some of the things that these folks are sort of up against and facing, it's incredible. This is where that humility piece comes in.
Right.
And so many of my memories come from people like that.
Right.
But there were, and it really kind of led to this idea that, when we look at people, the people that are easiest, or they're not the easiest to love, the people that are not the easiest to love are sometimes the ones that need it the most.
Definitely.
And there was a gal years ago. She became part of my most flattering experiences as a person, I guess. But just for the purpose of the story, I'll call her Niki. She was a gal that she was a sex trade worker. She was dealing with the target of our investigation, which was a mid-level drug trafficker that was working out of a bar. And she would visit him every day, and she would what we called load up. And then she would take that drug back out to the other girls working in the strolls, and basically feed their addictions. Right. So she was a drug trafficker, but she was also a person that obviously needed love. And I remember, often sitting in the bar, her coming in, sitting on my lap, playing with my earrings, having a little talk, that kind of thing. And then she would go. But there was a shift in her. I could see that me being kind to her was actually drawing her into me a little bit.
I'm sure she wasn't very used to that, right?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, can you blame her, really?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But this happened. And I'm like, wow. And I'll tell you, the flattering piece was, and the sad part of it too, she was drawn to me because I was nice to her.
Yeah.
I didn't call her names. I wasn't rude to her. I was kind to her. I didn't slap her around. These are things that I wasn't obviously doing.
Paid her respect. Yeah.
I paid her respect and offered her a warm spot and the comfort that
Safety.
that she didn't always have.
Yeah.
So one day I'm out working and walking down the street, and a couple of those eyes that I was telling you about that kind of keep us safe, one of them happened to spot Niki as she was strolling down the street, and I didn't see her. Niki, she dove into a little alley just parallel to where I was walking, got into the alley and dropped her briefcase or the knapsack that she had with her, opened it up, tore off the dress that she was wearing, now standing stark naked.
She had seen you coming, right?
She had seen me coming.
Right, okay.
Pulls off this dress, slips a new, prettier, cleaner dress on, spritzes herself with a little bit of perfume, checks her makeup in a car mirror, and then comes bounding out onto the street to give me a big hug.
Right. Wow.
It was one of the most flattering things. But it really, really taught me something important, in that it's in that world, people still need the same things that we all crave, what we all want. Connection, love, and all of those things. And there are things that when we look at people from a vulnerable community, we don't always see that that's some of the things that they actually are needing and they're wanting. And so it's just a good, important thing to kind of remember and keep in mind.
Now, real talk, when you knew that she had a crush on you, were you like, oh no, how is this going to end? Obviously knowing that there was no way that you were going to pursue anything with her.
No.
So what kind of went through your mind? As flattering as it was, did that scare you a little bit?
Well, sadly, I knew how it was going to end.
Yeah, right. Not in the way that she was hoping for.
No, she was going to go to jail for all of the drug crimes.
Right.
And that really touches on sort of this next part of what that undercover experience was about, is that sometimes, that would have felt like such a betrayal. And it really kind of dives into this idea of between loyalty and secret keeping.
Yeah, yeah.
She was somebody that was, like I said, supplying a whole community of vulnerable women with drugs. And in some way, shape, or form, I guess, maybe kind of anchoring them to the street on some level. I mean, one could argue.
Right, right.
But she also was a person that, that, not that I loved her or I didn't even really liked her, but she was somebody that I felt empathy towards.
Right, right.
And so when the warrants go out for her arrest eventually, it's one of those times in my career where I had to think, well, geez, you know, what is it? Why is this okay to me to betray somebody that way? Right? And what is really loyalty and what is secret keeping? And for me, this is what I kind of came up with. I came to believe that there were two types of secrets in this world: good secrets and bad secrets.
Right.
So a good secret is a secret that's not going to get anybody hurt. If I was to explain it to a child, I would
It's
say,
like a white lie, you know?
yeah, I would say to them, it's like when you have a secret crush on a girl, right? And you tell your friend. Well, if your friend goes and tells the girl that you have a secret crush on her, he's not really being a good friend,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He's kind of betrayed you.
Right.
But nobody was going to get hurt as a result of sharing that secret.
Right.
Bad secrets are secrets where somebody is going to get hurt or is being hurt. So when we worked in that area, if we learned that there was a shipment of drug coming into the city, for example, right, from somebody, even a criminal associate that, you know, you might like or thought was kind of funny or whatever it was,
Yeah.
it wasn't a betrayal to go and spread that secret because it's a bad secret. If that drug shipment got here and was dispersed through the community, people seeking that drug are going to be breaking into homes to steal your things and, you know, to feed their drug addiction. You know, all of those things are going to happen, right? And so the best thing to do is just to try and interdict or stop that shipment of drug coming into the city.
Yeah, it's the bigger picture.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's because you're actioning a bad secret.
Right. Right.
And so that's how I sort of rationalized it.
Of course.
But taking it to the next level, I think to myself, how are we as adults at keeping good secrets and bad secrets? And I think we're really, really bad. And I'll give you as like a sort of a personal example of it. You know, my kids growing up, every once in a while, you would hear of a bad secret that would come back from the school. You know, somebody is doing this. And as a parent, you would receive that and it would make you feel like gross. Like, I don't know if that's happened to you where you've...
Not yet. They're still pretty young, but
It's coming.
Yeah, I know.
And you know what? When they share that bad secret to you,
Yeah.
this is the craziest part. They're doing it because they were told that when they hear something that's going on, like somebody's being bullied or whatever it is,
Yeah.
they're told to go and speak to an adult,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so they come and they tell us as adults what their secret is. And it's a bad secret. They've done their part.
Right.
But as adults, do we carry it on? Do we forward it on?
Yeah. And how do you respond to that?
Right. And we often don't.
Right. Right.
Because it makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah. And you don't always want to go where you're uncomfortable.
That's right.
But the bigger picture is, yeah, it should be passed along, you know. But again, it's all discretionary and it depends on the secret itself. But
well, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
This is one that's just, it's such a tragic example. I don't want this podcast to all be about tragedy and, you know, but this is a really bad example. We had a young man years ago who had fallen in love with a girl.
Okay.
And they had made arrangements over social media that they were going to meet the next day and they were going to exchange their very first kisses.
Okay.
Right? And what ends up happening is that in the morning, this kid wakes up and he's renewed and he's excited and he's ready to go off and get his first kiss from this girl that he loves. And he finds out that it was her brother that he had actually been communicating with over social media.
Oh, okay.
Devastated.
Right.
Embarrassed.
Right.
He was a young fellow who lived in a home where there was firearms. And he had access to them.
Okay.
Mom and dad are out working and feeling embarrassed, saddened, or whatever other emotions were going on. He goes down into the basement and he removes one of the firearms. He goes upstairs and he takes his life in the living room of the home. The thing that made this so tragic was before he did it, he messaged this girl several times telling her that he had the urge to do it.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And she went and she pass that on to her parents, because that's what their kids are told to do.
Yes.
Tell an adult.
Yeah.
And that family was on their way to a summer holiday when the first set of messages comes through. And although the gal says to her parents, I'm really worried something's going to happen, they say, we will deal with it when we get to the other side of the mountains.
And it's too late.
20 minutes later, and it was too late.
Right, right.
And that's because, we as parents sometimes need time to process some of the bad secrets we hear as well.
How am I going to respond to this? What are my actions going to be? And sometimes you think, oh, there's no way that's going to happen.
Right.
That's only in the movies, or that's the extreme. But it can and does happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, so for me, taking it back to undercover work, how I justified it in my brain, especially when it came to people that I liked or thought were funny or whatever, were kind to me, I always went back to the idea of the secrets that I'm seeing them do or commit, are they good or bad? If it was going to be something that was like one of those innocuous secrets that was never going to get anybody in trouble or get somebody hurt.
Yeah.
Some of those secrets stay with me to this day.
Right, right.
But if there were things that were more criminal in nature that were causing pain or causing potential suffering, I actioned them.
I think it's so interesting that even you were a police officer. So I feel like even the need you have to reconcile keeping those secrets within yourself goes to show, again, your humility and who you were as a cop and what kind of cop you were. Because I think a lot of people wouldn't make that association. Well, yeah, you were supposed to be keeping these secrets and it's okay. We understand. But it just goes to show how the human connection really did affect you. And you felt bad sometimes. But
when I talk about humility, I don't even know if I really mean my humility.
Right.
But what it taught me about was what humility is.
Yes. Yeah.
You can't look at a person in a particular situation and judge a book always by their cover.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
And truthfully, everyone does have a story. Not everyone lives behind white picket fences.
No. Yeah.
And this experience taught me that. This community, I lived in this really nice upper middle class suburbia community. And over the period of time that I was undercover, as my look changed, my language changed, my slouch changed, as all of those things happened, the community was also doing something that I didn't even realize was happening until one day I left.
Right.
And they were removing themselves away from me.
Yeah, yeah.
They were distancing themselves. And how do I know that happened? Well, I didn't, because like I said, when it's like watching a puppy grow. One day you just wake up and find yourself a dog. I never saw myself growing. So I never saw myself as the dog.
Yeah, yeah.
But then one day they came to me and they said, Dave, you know what? We got this great opportunity. We want you to, get involved in this project team targeting a group of gangsters.
Okay.
And you need to report to us on Monday, basically in a suit and tie.
Wow. Yeah.
And so my undercover career ended at that moment in time.
Right.
And I was switched into a new
Just
stream.
like that.
And all of the stuff that I had done to make myself believable in the role was easily cleaned up in less than 20 minutes.
Just from the exterior.
Yeah, I could shave my face. I put on clean clothes, got my hair cut, and started to look more presentable within our society. And what ends up happening, that community comes right back to me.
Wow.
That first...
But there's probably still a lot of mental work you had to do, right?
And that was the point.
Yeah.
All of that mental work was still needing to be done.
Yeah.
The very first week I'm back in sort of a new role, wearing a suit, walking down one of our really, really busy avenues that's, frequented by the business crowd.
Okay.
I had a very attractive woman walk up to me and say, hey, do you know how to get to, such and such a place?
Wow.
Freak me out.
Yeah, right, right.
And then somebody else asked me about where the eggs are at the local grocery store.
Yeah, yeah.
Freak me out.
Right.
because this community
You had
that
to kind of relearn how to communicate with your community, right? And how to respond to what they were, how they were reacting to you.
and that's why some people just can't get a job because of what they are.
Yeah.
And that's
yeah.
what we have to remember.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I always like to say, like, it doesn't cost you anything to smile.
Yeah.
And I feel like so many of the more vulnerable population feels ignored so often that to even make eye contact and give somebody a smile can really, truly make their day.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I always try to make a conscious effort of that too, and to teach my kids to do the same thing. It's not necessarily that they should be ignored, like they really shouldn't.
No.
And you never know what's going to kickstart that motivation. Maybe someone smiled and maybe it gave them enough of a confidence boost to kind of move forward in their journey. So yeah, I mean, this has been a really interesting episode. I could talk to you about your undercover days for hours, really. Yeah. But yeah, good secret keeping, bad secret keeping. What do you think your main takeaway from all of this was?
Oh man, for me, it still comes back to just remembering that everyone lives behind white picket fences.
Yeah.
I really believe that that's just something we all have to remember, and that everyone has a story that leads us to this place.
Yeah.
And if we do that, then we can support the people that are most vulnerable in our community, and maybe see a transformation in them that they didn't know they had.
Yeah, and like you said, everybody does have a story. And in one of our next episodes, we're going to talk about how to sell a life sentence and how to get that story out of, a lot of criminals that you have worked with. And you kind of liken it to a product that you sell, a life sentence being a product that you sell, and how they buy it, then they try to return it in court later. So all of that I thought was a really cool analogy. So we are going to get into that in our next episode. So thanks so much, Dave. This was awesome.
Nicole. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Ride Along. And if you're interested in learning more about Dave's career and the lessons he learned throughout, now that he's on the other side of it, be sure to pick up a copy of his book that he co-wrote with Sarah Cades called Skeletons in My Closet. And keep an eye out for his new release, Undaunted, with Susan Forrest.
My mantra of leaving people better than you found them continues to be my driver. And I hope you're leaving this podcast today feeling inspired, informed, and inclined to live your dash. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please be sure to like and subscribe. And take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us on The Ride Along.